Joe Crowley got Eric Cantor-ed. Should other Democrats be worried? For the second time in 4 years, a would-be future Speaker of the House lost a rather shocking primary to an unheralded challenger. This time, it was Democrats' turn.But, while then House Majority Leader Eric Cantor's 2014 primary loss fit neatly into the narrative of a Republican Party upset with its leaders, skeptical of moderation on issues like immigration and looking to shake things up, not to mention a GOP that had unseated a number of incumbents in primaries in the surrounding years, what accounts for the defeat of the House's fourth-ranking Democrat, Rep. Joe Crowley, D-N.Y. On Tuesday, Crowley's loss to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't totally out of the blue. As the Washington Post's Dave Weigel previewed this week, there was considerable interest in her challenge from the left of a member of the House leadership. But it wasn't supposed to be this easy.The latest results show her leading Crowley by 15 points. Like Cantor, Virginia, Crowley was earmarked by some for the top spot in the House. With plenty of consternation about the party's very old leaders, Crowley stood out as the not-quite-as-old alternative. The top three House Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Steny and James Clyburn, are all between 77 and 79 years old. Crowley is a relatively tender 56. But on Tuesday, he lost to a challenger exactly half his age, 28, and one who would be the youngest member of Congress by 5 years if she were to join the House today. With growing resistance to Pelosi's bid to return as Speaker, it's not hard to draw very cursory conclusions based upon just that fact, and many will, perhaps not wrongly. Nor is it difficult to draw a conclusion based on Ocasio-Cortez's more left-leaning politics. While being a member of leadership sometimes requires compromises that may not have endeared Crowley to the more liberal constituencies of his Queens and Bronx-based New York district, Ocasio-Cortez is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America and campaigned on universal Medicare and abolishing S.Immigration and Customs Enforcement, easy.The. Neither explanation is so simple. While Pelosi has earned her detractors in the House Democratic Caucus, they are largely members worried about losing, rather than members worried about her age. She has become a rather convenient and effective punching bag for the GOP, and a growing number of House Democrats who appreciate her leadership and fundraising are simply ready to cut bait in the name of winning back the House. As for the second theory, it's not like the left is lighting the world on fire in primaries this year. While the Bernie Sanders-ification of the Democratic Party has proceeded apace, Crowley comes from a remarkably liberal district. Hillary Clinton won it by 58 points in 2016, and is the first Democratic incumbent to lose a primary to a more liberal challenger this year. And that's with the majority of primary races already in the books for 2018. If this was a canary in the Democratic Party's coal mine, someone forgot to tell basically every other primary electorate that the party was ready to throw the bums out in favor of real liberals. Of course, even when Cantor was losing, it wasn't as if a ton of GOP incumbents went down with him. Just 2 lost that year in states whose maps had been redrawn. In fact, But looking back, it's not difficult to say that Cantor's loss was an expression of dissatisfaction with the party and its leaders. Just a year later, after all, Donald Trump was leading the GOP presidential primary contest, and the party has remade itself in his image since then. The years-long fuse that was the Tea Party eventually hit Cantor's district and then detonated with Trump. That's not to say the Democratic Party is headed down a similar path, or that Crowley didn't make mistakes. Cantor certainly did. An incumbent has to make mistakes to be vulnerable to a primary defeat because it's so difficult otherwise for challengers to get any traction. That's a big reason we don't see more incumbent primary losses, even when there is legitimate unrest, as in the GOP's Tea Party years. But if Cantor's loss was yet another isolated sign of unrest in the Republican Party in 2014, Crowley's defeat is perhaps an early signal of unrest in the Democratic base in 2018, a sign of exasperation that the old way isn't quite getting it done. Or maybe it's just a freak set of circumstances. The point is that Democratic leaders have to ask themselves which it is in a way they simply didn't just 24 hours ago. That's the lesson of Crowley's loss. As President Trump's party came together, a 28-year-old liberal activist ousted top House Democrat Joseph Crowley in the president's hometown Tuesday night, a stunning defeat that suddenly forced Democrats to confront their own internal divisions. Crowley, the number 4 House Democrat, and until Tuesday considered a possible candidate to replace Nancy Pelosi as leader, becomes the first Democratic incumbent to fall this primary season. He was beaten by underfunded challenger Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a former Bernie Sanders organizer who caught fire with the party's left wing. Crowley's loss echoed across the political world, sending the unmistakable message that divisions between the Democratic Party's pragmatic and more liberal wings may be widening heading into the high-stakes November midterm election. It also exposed a generational divide among Democrats still struggling with their identity in the Trump era. The community is ready for a movement of economic and social justice. That is what we tried to deliver, Ocasio-Cortez said in an interview with the Associated Press. She said she knew she could connect with the New York district, which includes Queens and part of the Bronx. I live in this community. I organized in this community. I felt the absence of the incumbent. I knew he didn't have a strong presence. Trump, on social media at least, seemed equally excited about Crowley's defeat. Perhaps he should have been nicer and more respectful to his president, Trump tweeted, oddly taking credit for a victory by a candidate more liberal than Crowley. He added, the Democrats are in turmoil. All in all, Trump had reason to celebrate Tuesday night as all 3 of his endorsed candidates survived primary challenges that could have embarrassed him in the party. Those included New York Representative Daniel Donovan, who defeated convicted felon and former Congressman Michael Grimm in New York City's only Republican stronghold, and former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, who once branded Trump a fraud, but has warmed to the president in the last 2 years. Romney easily won his party's primary for a U.S. Senate seat in Utah, virtually ensuring he'll be elected in November. Yet none of the day's contests mattered more to Trump than the one in South Carolina. Governor Henry McMaster, one of the president's earliest and strongest supporters, survived an unusually tough challenge from a political newcomer, self-made Republican millionaire John Warren. The White House went all in for the governor in recent days, dispatching the president and the vice president to the state in an effort to prevent a political debacle. About 16,000 voters in 2 of New York City's outer boroughs sent a message Tuesday that reverberated around the state and country. Queens Representative Joseph Crowley's stunning loss to first-time candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old Democratic socialist from the Bronx, has the potential to shake up politics in New York and Washington, where Crowley was a high-ranking House member with his eye on succeeding Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. But Ocasio-Cortez's win wasn't the only result to grab headlines in New York, where there were several crowded primaries in marginal districts that Democrats are looking to flip this fall. 1. The Democratic establishment took a hit. Crowley was part of New York City's old school of politics. He won 10 terms in Congress, rising to become one of the city's most powerful power brokers as head of the Queens Democrats. His loss to Ocasio-Cortez, who is poised to become the youngest woman ever elected to Congress this fall, was quickly hailed by the more progressive-minded wing of the Democratic Party as a major win over the establishment. Ocasio-Cortez had support from a Revolution, the political group that sprung from Bernie Sanders' Democratic presidential run in 2016. Her positions lean heavily to the left, including support for a Medicare for All bill and abolishing the S.Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency.But. She wasn't the only one to beat a Democrat backed by the establishment. In central New York, Syracuse University visiting professor Dana Bolter defeated Juanita Perez-Williams, who had support from Pelosi and the House Democrats' campaign arm. Bolter will take on Representative John Katko, R. Camillus, Onondaga County, in November. 2. A boost for Cynthia Nixon. New York's often criticized voting laws split up federal and state primaries, meaning actor Cynthia Nixon's Democratic primary challenge to governor Andrew Cuomo won't be on the ballot until September 13. But Nixon's campaign, which was badly in need of a boost with a recent public opinion poll showing her trailing Cuomo by 35 points, saw reason to celebrate Tuesday night. She and Ocasio-Cortez have endorsed each other's primary bids this week. Like Ocasio-Cortez did to Crowley, Nixon is challenging Cuomo from the left and will need support from progressive-minded Democrats in New York City to win. "This is what happens when you give people a choice," Nixon said in a statement. "They show up, and they reject the status quo." 3. Few surprises outside Nick, Syracuse. Elsewhere in New York, the perceived frontrunners largely carried the day. Assembly Majority Leader Joseph Morell, D-N.Y, Monroe County, easily won a four-way race in the Democratic primary to succeed the late Rep. Louise Slaughter, D. Fairport. He'll take on Republican neurosurgeon James Maxwell in November. Moore, succeeding Slaughter, Morell cruises to victory in Democratic primary. More, 7 House primaries to watch in New York on June 26. Antonio Delgado, a Kingston attorney, appeared to come out on top of the 7-person Democratic field in the wide-ranging 19th Congressional District, which includes the Poughkeepsie area and stretches north toward the Albany area and west into Broome County. Delgado is a fundraising leader in the race and will now take on Representative John Faso, R. Kinderhook, Columbia County, in the district that has a near-even split of Democrats and Republicans. Representative Eliot Engel, a Bronx Democrat whose district stretches into Westchester County, easily defeated 3 primary challengers. More, Eliot Engel wins congressional primary in landslide. More results. Tadri Cobb, a street Lawrence County lawmaker, won the Democratic race to take on Republican Representative Elise Stefanik in the 21st Congressional District, which covers the North Country. On the Republican side, incumbent Representative Dan Donovan easily warded off a spirited challenge from former Rep. Michael Grimm of Staten Island, who resigned in 2015 after he was charged with tax evasion. This was a bit of a surprise. An NY1 Siena College poll released June 4 showed Grimm with a lead. Point 4. A fraction of voters decided things. Most voters stayed home Tuesday, and that meant some candidates were able to win with support from a fairly small fraction of eligible voters. Ocasio-Cortez, for example, won with votes from about 16,000 Democrats, according to unofficial results from the State Board of Elections. Crowley picked up about 12,000 votes. That means about 13% of the 214,570 active enrolled Democrats in the district cast a ballot. Turnout was above average for primary races in Monroe County, where the 25th district is located within. But even there, unofficial turnout was about 19% of active enrolled Democrats. Morrell won with about 15,300 votes. In the 19th district, which had 7 candidates that split votes, Delgado was on pace to win with about 8,000 votes. 5. New York's split primary system had an impact. New York is the only state in the country to split its state and federal primaries. It likely depressed turnout Tuesday. Only congressional races were on the ballot Tuesday. Democratic voters will head to the polls again in September to decide between Cuomo and Nixon, as will voters of any party with a contested state legislative primary. The split dates back to 2012, when a judge moved the federal primary to June to ensure there was enough time before the general election to send absentee ballots to military personnel overseas. But the Democrat-led state assembly and Republican-led Senate have been at odds over the state's primary ever since, unable to agree on a date to unify the federal and state races.